what is that fear like when you're experiencing it, of like trying something new, coming on air, the butterflies in your chest? Like what does that feel like?
Mentally, I think it's, doubts start to creep in because it's something new. Will I be interesting? Will I have anything insightful to say? Is there value to my experience that will relate to others?
Varun is a UPenn graduate, from the M&T program over there doing engineering and business, had a variety of different startup experiences before deciding to take the plunge with me. Welcome everyone to Woven Wings Live, where we bring you wisdom and tools for vibrant living. I'm your host, Rahul Didwania, and joined as always by my co-host, Gabe Crane. And if you enjoy listening to us, please share with a friend or leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, follow along our journey by joining either our newsletter in our show description, as well as our YouTube channel, where we continue to post full episodes, as well as snippets and shorts. Again, you can find links to all of that in our show description. So for today's episode, our title is Startup Founders Reflecting on Their Fear of Failure. And I'm particularly excited because the founders in question here are myself and my co-founder, Varun Didwania, who's our guest today. And for those that are just tuning in, this is our second episode in our Facing Fears mini-series. And so our previous episode is just setting the stage on why we're exploring fear as a topic. Today, we're going to be looking at fear of failure, as well as potentially some other areas in the context of being a founder. And then our next episode, just to preview it, is going to be an episode about the neurobiology of fear, right? So how do we actually experience fear in our brains, in our minds, in our psychology, in our bodies? And we're very excited to be exploring that in our subsequent episode. But with all that said, I just want to welcome in Gabe, you, and I'm excited to get into this with you. But what's coming up for you?
Yeah, Rahul, thanks for that. I'm excited to have you on the hot seat a little bit today as the guest. And you didn't mention it yet. I know it's coming, but I'm also really excited to be meeting Varun, who is your brother, family, and your co-founder of Breakout IQ. And I just think that the biggest thing I think about with this is that we all have dreams of things we want to do. And I know I have dreams of things I want to do. And in the process of actually manifesting those dreams, there are so many fears and roadblocks that come up. And so this is a hugely important topic. How do you manage that fear of failure and keep moving, and the experience of failure too, and keep moving towards your dream and move it towards manifestation? And I think you and Varun are such a great example of that, because you guys have done that. You created a company together. You decided, you had the crazy idea, let's do this as family. Then you did it and went through the whole journey, exited your company. And I just think there's so much to learn from that. And so whether you're listening to this as a founder or potential founder, or just with any kind of dream of what you want to do, I think understanding how to tackle that intimidating experience of possible failure and that fear is so crucial. And so, yeah, that's kind of what's coming up for me. Also, just the beauty of family, and maybe I could kick that back to you, to you, Rahul. Just started off as, how does having Varun on the show here as your brother, someone you have so many roots with and relationship with, how does that impact kind of how you feel being on the show today?
It's so funny that you asked that question, Gabe, because I was just noticing that I feel different than I usually do. And we've even had friends, right? And people we know very, very closely on the show before. And for some reason, this still feels different. And it's on the one hand, especially exciting because it's, I've wanted to get Varun on the show since we started, and we were just looking for the right time, and what it took was the wrong time to make it happen, which I'll share later on. But then on the other side, there's like unexpectedly like a different kind of butterflies, which I didn't expect at all. Which is I'm like, oh, I'm creating in front of Varun, even though we've done that for we did that for years together, and even that is a cool feeling just to notice. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And what do you mean by that? That this was the right time through the wrong time?
Yeah, so we were originally hoping to have that neurobiology of fear episode, this time around, but kind of just the way the chips fell, it's going to be our next episode. And so in our mad scramble, to find our content for this episode, I just reached out to Varun. I was like, "Hey, Varun, are you willing to do this?" And here we are. And I'm sure we'll get into what Varun's experience of that last minute text was, and where he's at with all this. So with that, without further ado, I'd love to bring Varun in. So as Gabe mentioned, Varun, my brother, at one time my roommate, my co-founder. We've had many relationships. My rival on the basketball court. So we have all sorts of things going on. And Varun is a UPenn graduate, from the M&T program over there doing engineering and business, had a variety of different startup experiences before deciding to take the plunge with me. And, he and I co-founded the company Breakout IQ, which, many of you have heard me mention on air a number of times. And we did that back in 2015 and had a great ride. And after a few years, Varun and I decided to sell the company and pursue other things. And, again, very excited to examine this experience with you, Varun. And with all that said, just want to welcome you onto the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, so we've alluded a little bit to kind of the last minute nature of bringing you onto the show. What's that been like for you, and how are you feeling about it?
As time has gone on, the short time it's been, probably 18 hours, feeling better and better. But initially, you asked me how I was doing when you called me. I'd answered the phone. I was like, yeah, I'm a little afraid. Haven't done anything like this before. Don't love that you're having butterflies right now. You're supposed to take mine away, not to have some of your own. But no, I'm just kidding. I think I'm, having talked through it, I'm already feeling excited about it. And it's always fun debriefing our experience, and I think some new things will come out of it that we both walk away from this feeling excited, feeling some new insights. So it'll be good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's so interesting, right? Is you start right there with a simple ask of, okay, let's do this interview. And I think you're naming, Varun, the fear that came up for you through that. And I'm curious, I know we're going to get into the company and your guys' experience founding that, and some of your personal experiences too, Varun. But how do we just presence and like what is that fear like when you're experiencing it, of like trying something new, coming on air, the butterflies in your chest? Like what does that feel like when you're feeling that fear?
Yeah. I mean, physically, it's what you described. It's that, butterflies in the chest and stomach, and, heart racing a little bit. But mentally, I think it's, you know, doubts start to creep in because it's something new. Will I be interesting? Will I have anything insightful to say? Is there value to my experience that will relate to others? Those are the initial thoughts, right? And fortunately, Rahul and I have such a rapport on having these kind of conversations that immediately once we started talking, it kind of all melted away. And it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to be together, talking through our experience. That's always fun. That's always insightful. We always love doing that, whether it's just us two or with others. So I was able to pretty quickly melt away. Of course, there's still a little bit, but for the most part, yeah, I've already kind of adapted and moved through it.
Yeah, what I love about what you named there, Varun, is there's like a soundtrack to fear, right? When we feel it, that there's this inner dialogue that often emerges. We talked on a earlier episode with Rosie Greenberg about the inner critic, and the inner critic, in one way of looking at it, often finds fear or moments of fear and inserts itself and asks us those questions, right, around, are we actually positioned to do anything valuable? And I think it's interesting, right, just to observe that. And I think the other point that you alluded to that's coming out for me is what that process of the fear melting away look like. And in certain cases, just being in partnership, being in community, being in a familiar place, that container, of relationship can often hold fear and help it, sort of melt away in some capacity. Gabe, I'm curious. I know you were about to say something. If that resonates with what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's putting me in the bodily sensations that you guys are describing, and I didn't have those same kind of feelings. I guess we're like coming along with our project, so I'm just like, okay, like here's what we're doing today. Like I didn't feel that fear, and then as you're describing it, Varun, it's like, I mean, I just know it so well, right? Of like there's the physical, there's like butterflies. I also experienced it as kind of like a contraction. I think this is like a very like physically based fear, but Rahul mentioned that one thing you guys talked about is like fear of heights. I have like a huge fear of heights, and that feeling of being totally crippled by like we went to New York when I was a kid, back when like the World Trade Centers were still up, and you could go up to the roof of the World Trade Center. And I remember going up there and I could not move. Like I was just like frozen. You have to, the way they had it set up, you had to walk around like the entire roof to get back to like the escalator going down. And I just remember like holding on to the inner guardrail, the inner velvet rope or whatever, like just leading myself around. And I, it seems to me like in this case it's the confidence that the relationship that the two of you have, the confidence you have in each other, that kind of helped dissipate that. But feeling it in my body, just as it's being talked about, it's so debilitating. And so I think the question that comes up for me is, what is the process of like, wow, you guys started a company, like how did that not debilitate you at the beginning, at the very start of just being like, this is crazy, like it's too much, it's too daunting. I think that's the first place where so many of us get stuck. We never leave the harbor. We didn't get out on the water to actually fail. So how do you melt that, and get things moving past that initial roadblock?
Yeah, that's a great question. We were just starting to look back at the early times, and the honest answer is we didn't for about a year. We talked about making a change in our lives, that we both wanted to improve our jobs and everything. We were like, all right, well, once a week we'll set a phone call aside and we'll start to take the leap in private as we figure out what we want to do. I think we had two of those calls over like an 8-month period. and we're, we can dive into the fears in a bit probably, but yeah, there were a lot of things that just got in the way of us committing. What actually got us there was we kind of had a, hey, are we real or not? Like, are we going to do this or not? And then we said, if we're going to do it, let's really commit some time. And we took a week off and we spent that whole week together and we brainstormed and analyzed and did all sorts of things. And at the end of that, broke it down in a couple bite-sized pieces. And we're like, hey, no matter what, the first 3 months of this, and we can get into the specifics, but the first 3 months of this are going to be fun and we're going to learn something and we're just going to be around each other and it'll be improvement over our day-to-day right now. And I think focusing on, hey, the worst case scenario is pretty good. Was definitely for me a huge part of taking the leap and getting ready. I don't want to speak for Rahul, but thinking about it that way and viewing everything above that as just the gravy on top, definitely ease a lot of those concerns.
So yeah, what I'll add to that really quickly. For me, I think of that fear of taking the leap as going well before dating, well before Varn and I even started talking. I think I had this idea of wanting to start a company and see what that was like and pursue that adventure of creativity and expression and all that for years. And it was really hard, and I kind of touched it and came back, touched it and came back a couple of times, but never, you think about a lot of the stories you hear, never even like sold the shirts or sold the lemonade at the lemonade stand, like never really got into like real action around it. And I think with Varun, it took that year of similarly just like touching it, not touching it, until we had that moment of let's actually explore this in earnest, right? Not just an idea. And I think through that, a couple of things happened. One was, all the analysis that Varun was alluding to, but the other part of it alongside that, I think, was like actually experiencing in a very small dose what it would be like to be working together, right? Because a lot of what we spent spent that week doing was talking about ideas, brainstorming, like Varun said, analyzing, learning about each other. And I think that was not the way we framed it, but in a way it gave us a flavor. And if I was to abstract it out, right, when we think about facing fear, I think that is one of the antidotes, right, is actually start to experience the thing that you're afraid of. And we happen to do it in a context where it was very safe, right? It's like we just took a week off of work. We're just hanging out. We didn't actually say that we're doing the thing that we're going to do, right? So it created the environment in which we got to experience it. And then I want to double click and emphasize a piece that Varun mentioned around kind of reframing the worst case scenario. I think that was really, really important to me, which was like finding security in a framing of the worst scenario as still being better than status quo, right? Both in terms of the experience that we would gain, in terms of what we would learn, kind of those obvious things, but even actually from a career standpoint, and especially being here in the Bay Area, I was like, oh yeah, if we try to start a company and we fail, that's great. That's sought after, around here. So I'm like, even the prospect of failure could be framed as success quite easily. And so I think those factors were really important for my journey through that.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll add, just from hearing you talk reminds me, yeah, we had each other. Like I wouldn't have taken that leap on my own. I don't know about
Yeah,
you, but
same. No, definitely.
for me, knowing I had someone in there with me, with all the benefits that comes with that, um, yeah, made it so much safer to go about it, and it guaranteed the fun and the curiosity and the interest and all of that. So I don't want to minimize that. I think, who I was with played a huge role in overcoming that fear.
100%. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to dive in on that point in more detail. But before, I just want to kind of reflect back what I'm hearing, which is that, it sounds like the two of you were able to reposition some of the fears and the soundtrack, as you said, Rahul, like the negative self-talk, that was able to be transformed through your interaction and through kind of looking more closely. Kind of, it's like almost like an overgrown forest. You had to kind of like pick through those stories to get to more of an assessment of the reality of the situation. And through that, you're able to connect with, well, what does it really mean to actually fail? And how could that actually be a positive? So there was a whole influx of new information that superseded the fear-based information, the fearful narratives that were inhibiting and blocking the path. But I'm curious, if you guys can expound a little bit on the nature of your relationship and how it supported you guys, because I can totally understand that intuitively. It's like having someone else to jump into something scary with is so important. I'm like using just very physical metaphors today. You guys are talking about your company. I remember like for my 30th birthday, I'd never been skydiving. And I just decided, all right, it was a classic take the leap thing. I was like, all right, I got it. And I'm scared of heights, right? So that is it's tied to that. So it's like, I got to throw myself out of this airplane. But I needed my brother actually came with me on that trip and some good friends of mine, and having that kind of collective energy around it and putting out like, okay, I'm doing this and I'm being witnessed in this, I'm buying in with other people on this, helped get me over that hump. So I'm curious, you guys have so much depth and history to your relationship. How did you guys leverage that in terms of building trust together to take this leap?
Varun, go for it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think a big part of our history in the years leading up to that, Raul's older than me, and a big part of our relationship was actually him guiding me through, you know, parts of college, early career when I was unhappy at times with the direction I was taking and or the role I was in and how that didn't push me in the direction I wanted to go. And I credit Rahul with talking me through that, helping me think through options, finding inspiration and specific books or authors or different perspectives and frameworks he'd used. So we had that history of figuring some of these things out together. I think more him guiding me than the other way around, but we'd had that history for a few years, and then when we started to have the opportunity to really talk about those things on a more even footing, I would say, as we both got older and a couple of years into our careers, it became very clear that there was overlap in some of the issues we were dealing with on an individual level with our careers, and also some of the interests we had and the aspirations we had. So both the negative and the positive, I think, kind of aligned at the right time, and we were able to explore that together. Again, in a concentrated period of time, we were on a trip together in Asia, and we were able to really explore these things and form that depth in a new context that we had never had joint career context before. And I think that meant a lot. That meant when it became time to sit down for a week and brainstorm, we didn't have to go through all that stuff. We just got right to it. And the other part I'll add aside from all of that is just, of course, then there was, I think I was 23, 24 when we started it. Like, we had all of that history as well of just forming the trust between us, knowing that, we could blindly trust each other. We could speak freely. All of those things, just continue to add to that safety, that comfort with taking risk. That idea that if I try something or I throw a bad idea out there, it's not going to be humiliating. It's not going to be thrown back at me. It's not going to be shamed. It's going to be embraced. It'll be, hey, let's explore that too, and see where it goes. And 90% of them don't go anywhere, but 10% of the wacky ideas even turn into something, right? So I think all of that was huge for feeling free and feeling vulnerable.
I want to hear from you too, Rahul, but I just want to say that, Varun, that is so beautiful to hear. And I'm in a very, we're talking about fear today in this whole series. It's like, it's such a tangible experience, and that it's this kind of like discomfort, this frequency, this like, I don't know if you're watching this, you can see my hand, or if you're listening, it's just like this kind of shaking that's so uncomfortable. And then everything you just described is so beautiful, man. Like, it makes me think about my brother. It makes me think about my close relationships where I feel that, that trust. It makes me think about the relationship, Rahul, that you and I have developed over the last few years, where it's just like, finding those people that are in your corner, that you're in the boat with, and that you can do the opposite of that discomfort, where you can really relax, you can really breathe, you can really trust into the feedback you're getting from someone else. And just what a balm that is, what a nourishing, supportive influence that is in a world that can be very intimidating, very, very scary. I'm curious, Rahul. Yeah, you were going to jump in and
Beautifully said, Gabe, and Varun. Also, I'm having the feels, just listening to you talk about it, because it's very interesting, right? You use that shaking hand analogy, Gabe, and just building off that, right? I think if you're in that moment where your hand's shaking and someone holds it, right, and now you have hand in hand, even just, I was just imagining that as you were talking, and I could feel that nourishment coming over me, right? There's something in relationship, in partnership, when that trust, that love, that care, that commitment to each other is there. And I think in the case of Varun and my relationship, right, I think it was, to Varun's point, like we had the history that shortcutted a lot of the things for us. But I'll also note, like, it really also comes down to who we are, and how we mesh, right? So like other people I've known for my entire life, I could not start a company with, right? Even if there is that trust, even if there was maybe even alignment of interests, right? There may not have been that like openness, that like confidence that, hey, we can say things to each other, that we can, kind of be fully vulnerable with each other, that we don't need to like, show like there's no showmanship, right? I think those things, and not to say that we were perfect at that, but I think there was a lot there in terms of what Varun and my dynamic was, in the several years leading up to when we, when we became adults, but before we started the company, right? And so I think that was really important, and I draw somewhat of a parallel, Gabe, to our relationship, right? It's we took a we took a leap of faith with a little bit less, of an understanding of each other, right? And obviously the level of the leap of faith maybe wasn't the same either, but there was a feeling, right, that both of us felt at the end of, our coaching relationship, where we're like, yeah, I think we're down to try this with each other. And I think that part is something that I don't know that I could describe it, right? But there's something around like a synergy in a relationship, that allows for a confrontation of fear in a whole different frame of mind, or frame of being, I should even say. So that was the other point coming up for me.
Yeah, I both of you feel free to jump in on this and comment or take it however you like. But it makes me think about. I was just talking with a friend of mine who was saying that the opposite of fear is trust, right? The opposite of fear is not calm. The opposite of fear is trust. It's the ability to, as you said, kind of find that steadiness, Rahul, beyond the shaking hand and plow forward, into the endeavor. And that trust, for example, in Ren Shui, in the Qigong system that I teach, that I use as a base in my coaching, trust is the beginning of the heart qualities, the beginning of awakening this ability to have assurance, have a path to walk. And it just feels like I'm just really struck by that, as I'm listening to the two of you speak, because that having that, it's like that's like almost like a given here. It's like you guys live together, or you experienced life in relationship to each other for 24 years or whatever it was. So much experience in that. Like we haven't heard yet like the 10-year-old scraped. I want, like, what's the 10-year-old version of the basketball rivalry, the scraped knees, the arguments, the making up, all of that, creating this context where you guys could just be real together, where you could really, struck by what you said, Varun, you could try things on and, not worry about saying something stupid, or, you're in the active process of figuring things out together. And that really makes all the difference. If we can find those places to trust ourselves, of course, but also those relationships where we have the ability to lean into these ideas that we have that are kind of on the edge of what's possible or that we can imagine, that makes those possibilities so much more real when there's someone who will give us the time of day, to care about us, to relate with us in an open, realistic way, and a loving way too. So I know not everyone feels like they have that out there, but that's like what's coming up for me is just like, oh my God, call your family, call your brother, talk to him, find who, whether it's your biological or your chosen family, like who is there that you can, pour your heart out to, and be vulnerable, trust that you can be yourself with them, and get an encouraging or positive response back.
Yeah, and one thing I'll throw into the mix, like one vector on this opposite of fear is trust. Another way I think about it at times is the opposite of fear when it comes to uncertainty is faith, right? That faith that something will play out in a certain way or that you'll be okay at the end of the day. And I think one of the dynamics that I really, really felt so strongly about with Varun and then now with you, Gabe, in this project, right, is faith can also tend to waver at times, right? And when you have a partnership, right, that you're kind of taking the sum of two people's faith at any given moment, right? So if one person's faith is wavering, but the other person's is strong, it can still lift the average. And I think we had many of those moments both leading up to starting the company and then certainly after starting the company where we would borrow each other's faith or trust, and Varun in particular I think was even more kind of comfortable with some of the uncertainty that we faced, but I think at times we both had different levels of fear around that uncertainty, and that's just something that came to mind.
Yeah, was there any what would you guys say was like a key moment or the key moment when you really needed to have a lot of faith to jump on that journey? What was the key leap of faith moment for Breakout IQ?
It's a great question. I think two different moments come to mind, and they're very different stages. The first one was actually, alluded to that week we took off from our jobs to brainstorm. We walked out of that with three ideas, one of which was what turned into Breakout IQ. And we weren't committed yet to moving forward on any of them. And what we had committed to was we are going to get feedback from friends and family on these ideas. And I was terrified of putting these ideas out there, especially with what Breakout IQ was. Like the first two are, quote unquote traditional tech ideas. For those that don't know what Breakout IQ is, it's corporate team building events. And specifically, our first idea was we're going to do pop up escape rooms for companies, which neither of us knew anything about. I had done 2 escape rooms. Rahul had done 1. Like we knew nothing about this space.
And I'll note that the one that I did was during that week when we were together.
Yeah. And yeah, I was terrified, dude. I don't remember all the specifics, but I think I was probably slower to act on getting feedback because I didn't want to put this out there. And once I started to, again, referencing, faith and trust and comfort with the people around you, every single person I talked to, like, they heard the first 2 ideas and they're like, okay, yeah, cool. Sounds like something you can go for. And I'd always share the Breakout IQ idea last because it was the most out there. And I was afraid to share it because I'm like, oh, they're going to judge me for this because this is some random idea. And every single one of them like lit up when I said that idea. And they're like, that is so you. That's really unique. I think you should go for that one. Literally every person I talked to. And, it's probably like a dozen people. I don't remember exactly. But for me, that was the leap of faith. And that was that transformational moment around like, oh, when I say this, the people that know me view it as a positive, not as something to be afraid of. And people know you often know you better than you know yourself, right? And so they would say that, and the fear started to melt away. And the second conversation was easier than the first, and the third was easier than the second, and so on and so on. And yeah, so that was the first moment for me, and I can remember some of the conversations even to this day, and some of the faces, reactions that people had. So that was the first one. I think the second one, this is more when we were struggling a bit with that faith. I think it was about 4 years in. We, the business had always been doing pretty well. It was, profitable, but it had kind of plateaued. We were 4 years in, so it was longer than we had committed to, and longer than we had planned to be at that stage. And we weren't sure, we'd kind of had like probably a year's worth of conversations around like, should we do this? Should we not? Should we do this? Should we not? And we'd almost always land it. All right, here's 2 or 3 months of goals we'll have. And if we hit them, great. And if not, okay, then we need to think about what to do. And inevitably, we'd get 75% of the way to the goal, which means we'd be stuck in the gray area again. And it was a discouraging place to be at, not having that clarity. And I remember we went for a walk on the rooftop of the Salesforce Tower, I think, right, in SF. And we kind of just got real with each other. And we're like, what are we doing here? And how can we realign with some of the goals and principles we had around running this thing lean and, being honest with ourselves and what do we really want out of this? Is it still fitting into our lives? And I think, my memory is that conversation is probably the most real we got with each other in any of these, will we, won't we style conversations. And it led to some changes in the business that were positive. We can get into what happened when COVID hit and how that changed the business. But in the 6 months prior to that, we made some changes that kind of renewed our faith in the business, renewed our faith in how it can fit into our lives instead of the business dictating our lives. And I think there was a lot of fear around letting the business dictate our lives, letting, not upsetting the other because we, felt a certain commitment to each other and obviously our relationship, how much that mattered. So anyway, long-winded answer, but I think those are the two key moments for me.
Yeah, and I think the couple of things I'll pull out, just building on what you shared, Varun, is nestled in there. There's fear of relationships. I think we've only talked about our relationship in the context of it being a strength, and I think one of the things we've looked back on at times is like, hey, where did that attachment to our relationship? We started out with an agreement that if the relationship is ever under duress or feeling like it's going to be at risk, then that's the day we step away from the business, right? That's kind of the level of agreement that we formed around it. And we're like, hey, was that also, I think that was a great thing, but on the other hand, was it also negatively impacting our leadership, right? Was it getting in the way of us, be like having real conversations or confronting each other because there was a fear of entering that territory. There was a fear of creating discord or a fear of just having tension, and when I reflect on it, I don't know that was ever like a conscious force for me, but I do often wonder if it was an unconscious force. And I still don't know that there were a lot of times where I can, or if any, very few times where I can remember where I was like thinking something and I held back because of fear of relationship. But what I'm sure was present was along the lines of what Varun was saying, was my not even getting real with myself. Forget getting real with Varun, getting real with myself, because maybe that exploration within myself would take me to places that would be in conflict, right, with what Varun and I had talked about or thought about. And so I think there was a kind of a process of self-discovery and self-awareness and self kind of just honesty, right, in a form that was potentially held back, right, by fear of creating conflict or creating tension. And it's funny because there was no evidence in Varun and my interactions to suggest that we would not be able to have that conversation, right? And and that is kind of how it played out. As even when we did come out with things that maybe were in different places, it created a healthy creative tension, right, that helped us make like Varun was saying, better decisions. But at times, I'm sure it was a force, that fear of confrontation that I think was getting in the way. The other piece that I'll pull out is I think there was a fear of letting go or a fear of wading into the unknown territory that was present in different forms throughout the entire journey, right? So anytime we're considering a strategic shift, anytime we're considering letting somebody go, bringing somebody on, anytime we're thinking of investing in a new direction, or kind of where it ended up, like even selling the business, right? All of these different moments came with moving from some sort of comfortable, established status quo, even when that status quo was not working, right? There was still a comfort in being there. And I think that tension came up a lot, and a lot of the uncertainty I think we felt can sometimes be tied to that fear of letting go, of what we had begun to get comfortable with. And then the third one I'll throw on, just as the other one was like, there was just a fear of of like taking risk. I think for me especially, I can just speak to my experience of it. Like even when we'd accumulated a little bit of a war chest, and we had options, there was like there's a whole thing around relationship to money, but I think a bigger thing just around like fear of taking chances, and investing, fear in investing our money or our time, or our attention and resources, to commit to a decision or a path at the exclusion of other paths, right? So there's this fear of, hey, is this the right decision? Am I going down the right track? Is it worth these resources? And so anyhow, there's a whole family of things. I'll shoot it over to either to you, Varun, to comment on that, or Gabe for you to process all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious what you would say, Varun.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, continuing to focus on this fear topic, right? I think a lot of what you said highlights both the pros and cons of fears in different ways, right? And focusing, I'll address the cons first, right? Like you said, we never had a confrontation that actually got to any hurt feelings or any anger or anything, as far as I remember. And what's funny, this fear of, the importance of our relationship over the business, the fear of not upsetting each other, even though there was no real reason to be afraid of it, that fear, I think, had a control over both of us, and not dealing with it is what led to me being most upset with you. Like, if that makes sense. Like, the moments I was upset with you were when I didn't acknowledge my fear and I held things in. And the moment we talked about it and I addressed that fear, for myself first, like you mentioned, and then later with you, we dealt with it and it was always fine. And it shows you, the downsides of, I guess, not acknowledging your fears and not dealing with them. But then the pro of it, you talked about the some of the risk around spending or trying things. Obviously we both were on different sides of that for a lot of things. I think in overall I was probably more of the risk taker and free spender on certain things than you were. And there are times, again, it would lead to frustration or whatever, but hey, having your fear check me on some of those things was good at times. And when you acknowledged it yourself and transformed it from fear to like analysis, right? Then you were able to talk through it with me. When it was just the fear speaking, I would be frustrated. I'll be like, dude, you just sound like you don't want to take a chance. Like, what the hell? That's not how we're going to do this. But when you addressed it and you broke it down and then you showed it to me, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But the point I'm trying to make is not to harp on the negative part of that interaction. It's like, dealing with the fear brought out some good stuff. It highlighted actual concerns of yours that we were able to deal with. So, and I think by and large avoid some bad decisions, right? Not that we didn't make our fair share of those, but I think so. I credit some of those fears positively for saving us and lengthening our runway and allowing us to make other mistakes that we learned more from. So those are just a couple of thoughts that came up for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing both of you reflect on it, and it's beautiful to just be with it as you guys are processing through it now a couple years later, right? But what really stands out to me is the ongoing nature of fear. It's like, okay, great, you guys got over your fears to start a company. Now you're in the boat together, and now you're like scared of each other. You're scared of harming the relationship that you have, or needing to pull punches or think about the other person's well-being. And so it just reminds me how fear is kind of like a constant companion, and as you mentioned, Varun, there, it has benefits, right? It's providing us information about the environment at the same time. And so it's not a one and done sort of thing. You don't handle your fears and then, sail off into the sunset. You are constantly in this process of being present to them and relating with them. And I love how, the stories that you guys were just sharing there highlight the challenge of people you are close to, right? That dialectic you mentioned, Rahul, between feeling comfortable and then the ongoing process of life constantly changing, evolving, the next risk to be assessed and decision to be made about what to do in relationship to that risk, all coming to bear on your day-to-day experience and what ends up actually happening within the relationship, within the business. And so yeah, so that kind of perpetual nature of it really sticks out to me. And I'm curious, kind of would love to hear both of your comments and takes on this, but what I'm kind of extracting from it is that, the name of this series is Facing Fear. That essentially finding some way, whether it's within yourself or in communication within the relationship, to confront, to face the fear, to name it, to list it, to be face to face with it rather than turning away from it and avoiding it, running from it, seems to be essential, to being able to actually do something productive with that fear. So it's that process of turning ourselves around to be like, all right, I'm ready, give it to me. Like, hit me with your best shot. I want to feel the fear. I want to know what it is and I want to deal with it. Seems like it's kind of like the baseline that I'm hearing from you guys that's gotten you through the tough times. And when you weren't able to do that, that's where more of the resentments or the suffering or the disconnect would kind of build up.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to speak to the so many thoughts coming up, Gabe, as I'm just processing what you're saying, because it's like the ongoing nature of fear, I think, is so real, and I think one of the biggest paradigm shifts in my thinking or relationship to fear was around recognizing that fear is present for even the like most accomplished, top of the game people that you can imagine, right? I often allude to this when I talk to people where, I've heard this interview with Kobe Bryant, heard this interview with Big Sean, he's an accomplished musician. Heard this interview with forgetting who it was, but some famous actor, right? And there's just like a common thread where they're like, yeah, fear is here with us, even at the top of our games, right? Or in this realm of business, right? A relationship or an uncle of ours who has done really well, started a company, killed it, did super, super well, went out and started a VC fund. And he has shared how like even at that stage when he's going out reaching out for money, fundraising the first time, it was scary, right? And I was like, wow, this is someone who's like done so much already on paper, right? And really gone through a lot of hurdles already. And even then, there's always this new frontier. And I think that really internalizing that concept, I think, is super important. And why it was a paradigm shift for me was like, okay, it's not that you're ever going to become fearless, right? It's that you're going to learn how to play with that companion that we're talking about. You're going to learn to listen to that companion, to understand what that companion is saying. And I think a lot of the strategies, Gabe, that you threw out, you can kind of talk about emotion in general, right? Like emotion has information. We should listen to that information, process it, be aware of it, take what we want, reject what we don't want. But I think why fear is so uniquely interesting to me is because that emotion in particular leads to that constriction, that cowering, that physical response where we feel weak, right? If we don't grow our capacity to relate to it. And so it's almost insidious in that way, right? Where it's telling us we're close to something we care about. It's something that we want to, we're onto something, but at the same time, it can be crippling us, rather than getting us closer to that if we don't build these um, these capacities, right? To look at it, to process it, to understand it, what's actually behind that fear, and then to mobilize it in service of that thing that we actually care about. So, yeah, Varn, I know you were going to jump in. I'll pause here.
No, that's a great set of points. What was coming to mind for me were a couple couple more breakout IQ moments, and so I'm trying to weave it into what you just said. But yeah, I mean, when I think about kind of the timeline of my relationship with this, again, we talked about the benefit of having each other, and so I think, hey, for me, early mid-20s, what was it? It was learning to deal with fear with someone else. And I think there were moments we propped each other up. I won't elaborate too much, but what comes to mind is, there was a moment we had a paper version of our escape room game that was not good. Like the locks were paper. There was not a real lock. It was like that shoddy. And it was a rare moment where Rahul was scared. We were with a bunch of our cousins, and Rahul was scared to do it. He was like, "No, let's not have them test it." And it was a moment where I was like, "No, I think we should just do it." Right. And I think that's a moment where I helped Rahul get over some fear that he had of putting this thing out there. But then, the flip side is, once we got that to a real thing, we reach out to friends and family and colleagues to be the first ones to actually pay for this thing. And I was terrified of that. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I still don't know if it's good enough now." And Rahul was fearless there. And he was like, "No, we got to do this, man. I'm going to send it to my 10 people. You got to send it to yours." And he forced us through it. Right. So, there are a million more examples, from the business I could bring up, but that's just month 1 to 6, how we both got each other through what's essentially the same moment, right? Putting this thing out there and putting some credibility on the line. But we both were on different sides of it. And yeah, so I think about learning to deal with that together, and how we had the benefit and privilege to be able to learn to navigate that together. I fast forward to when we're exiting the business, the decision to even do that. Some of the decisions we've been making on an individual level in the years since on what do we do next, and a lot of that is actually us trying to now learn how to deal with this without each other, on our own. How do we bring that self-awareness to what our fears are? How do we really, ask why, keep going a level deeper and confronting the real truth of what it is, not the surface level fear that comes up. And then how to reframe it in a way that's like, yeah, this is, I'm afraid of this because I care about this part of my life or this person or this value. And how do I reframe it into a positive to guide me forward? And I think, that's something we've both been navigating for a couple of years now, even though we had success. And it's been interesting. And, I know for me, like therapy and coaching and, being on the receiving end of that is certainly a huge part of being able to be honest with myself and find that self-awareness and use that to try to guide some decisions. So anyway, that's all what comes to mind for me around kind of the relationship with confronting fear head on.
Yeah, it's it strikes me. It's like the verb that's coming up for me is hunting. It's like rather like the hunter and the hunted. It's like fear hunts us down. We get freaked out. We're running from it, and then to be able to turn those tables and say fear has something valuable for me. If I know where my fear is, then I'm going to gain valuable information about what's alive for me, where some of the strongest possibilities or opportunities are in my life. And so therefore I'm going to go hunt it. I'm going to put on my camo gear or whatever and start creeping through the woods looking for it. I think there's something really powerful in that, to explore. And I think that can benefit all of us when we're thinking about pursuing our dreams, knowing that fear is going to be kind of part of it, or fear might be kind of the guardian of that, standing alongside it, indicating where it might be. So I'll put that out to you guys. I mean, I feel like you've kind of commented on it. I also heard, in what you just shared there, Varn, around the transition. We've talked about your guys' work together, doing Breakout IQ, and then a few years ago, you guys sold the company. You wrapped up. Obviously, you guys are brothers, your family, so you're very intertwined in each other's lives. But you went into your next projects, and I know that one of the things that unfolded, especially for you subsequently, was not necessarily a career thing, but actually the challenge of some family changes and losing a family member. And I'm curious, just as you've gone through that journey, whatever you feel comfortable sharing about it, but how did this fear manifest in that context? Obviously, a very different context. And how did it show up, and how did you deal with it there?
Yeah, just to briefly acknowledge your first point. Yeah, I love the hunter hunted analogy and turning that around and taking control of it right in that way. So I think that's a great way to put it. For the other one, yeah, it's interesting. For context, our oldest brother passed away 6 years ago now. So it was earlier in our journey with the business. Obviously, it brought a lot of emotion to that period of both the business and his health, his fight with leukemia and everything that went on. So yeah, I mean, there was a fear of loss at that time. A fear of um, you know seeing what he had to deal with and not wanting him to deal with more and lose his own life. A fear of what the future might be like, with him struggling or without him. I'm happy to go, more in depth on that. It's not something I'm not, afraid to touch. I want to make sure we're staying on topic, of course, and so rein me in with wherever I go with that. But yeah, it was a totally different type of fear, right? And I think for me, there was kind of dual fears that at times kind of cripple me or slow me down. And I think to the credit of the people around me, I was able to turn it into a productive thing, which was on one hand, like the fear of being there for him. And am I there enough? And am I doing enough to keep him happy, to invest in his care and his health, all of that. But also a fear of kind of losing myself to that. And being so focused on that at one point I was ready to give up the business. Fortunately, one of my uncles, who also was successful and started and sold his own business many years earlier, talked me down from that and said, "Hey, this can't be your whole life. I know you're afraid of this and you want to be there as much as possible, but you have to have your own life and do things." And he was able to help me focus on that. But other parts of my life I certainly neglected because of that fear of, am I there enough? Our brother's name, Pavan, to his credit, he also encouraged me during that time to keep doing what I needed to do for myself. So I had that blessing, and it certainly eased that fear of, am I here enough? Am I doing enough? But yeah, I think all of that fear mixed with kind of the all of the separate fears of like finally taking the leap and can we succeed on this business, all of that intersecting at once. On one hand, it was overwhelming at times. I think on the other, it also helped you with perspective, right? It made me realize, like, the fear of this business failing, like, who cares? Like who cares? Like, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And so I do think hey, the bigger the thing is that you're dealing with, and obviously, my brother's cancer is not something I had any control over, right? But the bigger that is to deal with, the smaller it makes the rest of the fears and the issues feel. So that was definitely a takeaway from that period. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, like, almost paradox, right? Where there's this, there's this approach to fear where we're like, hey, we need to diminish the fear. And what we're saying right now, or what we've been saying, is, hey, fear also is a gateway, or some way for you to see, like, hey, you care about something, right? You're actually invested in something happening or something playing out in a particular way. And so it's like, hey, if you diminish the fear, do you also end up diminishing how much you care? And I think it's one of those things where that doesn't have to be the case. That's where that paradox is, where fear can be the like signal or the indicator to you that something matters, but then that fear can diminish through a number of different ways, right? We've talked about wading into the thing you're afraid of and recognizing it's not as bad probably as you thought it would be. There's just having support and confronting the fear so that whatever comes, you're not at it alone. And I think that feeling of loneliness can often magnify the fear. And then there's a perspective piece, right, that Varun was talking about, which is not to invalidate your original fear, but to put it into a larger context and to recognize that, hey, like maybe this thing is, I'm feeling it, but also, hey, I don't need to be feeling it as intensely as I am. And that doesn't mean that I don't care about it, and I think that whole flow, was interesting to navigate right during that time, where, and Varn and I were just two characters of many, right, that were in this ecosystem feeling collective fear, right, around what was potentially going to happen, what did end up happening, what that path, was, and how painful or painless it would be, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of the above. And yeah, I think in a lot of ways, um, it's a very formative time period for us on just so many different dimensions. And I think this one around fear was one of just learning through that hey, it's going to be there. There are going to be challenges of all sorts of shapes and sizes, and we have to expect that we're going to face fear in many different forms, and just learning how to recognize that, like Varun was saying earlier, right, and build that awareness in deeper and deeper levels, I think is kind of one of the enduring takeaways from all of this.
Something that sticks out to me is what you shared, Varun, around the fears coming up around your brother and his experience and his passing, kind of dwarfing or contextualizing all the business fears that we were talking about before, and kind of it putting it into a kind of a context, or almost making it easier to take certain leaps, at least in moments. And it it brings me back to this, I like the primordial fear, the most ancient fear of death and dying, like just the passing on, the not being here, the not having. And yeah, I'm curious if you guys, either of you, have any thoughts on that, because I think that somehow, I think that's ultimately the biggest fear we have as people, is maybe humiliation and failure, which is like the top line topic of this episode. Maybe that's taller for some people. I know sometimes that feels worse. Like, would I rather die or be humiliated? I'm not sure which one. Like maybe I'd rather be dead than be alive and be humiliated, be a failure. But it's, to me, it's like we're so wound up as people around that baseline fear. And it sounds, at least in part, that encountering that, being forced to deal with that, in some ways freed you both to take certain steps, or it kind of puts you into touch maybe with what's most important, or where you want to focus your time and energy. It brought that imperative of the transitory nature, the passing nature of life forward, and kind of helped you to take life by the horns, so to speak. But yeah, I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts about that, of just the relationship of fear with our fear of dying, and how that can be transformational, be a positive, or, and anything kind of related to this.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely wade in there. A brief aside to what you were saying earlier, I watched an old Seinfeld episode yesterday, and the opening bit was exactly what you said. He says, the average American's number one fear is public speaking, and two is death. And so he says, to the average American at a funeral, they would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. So I think that's a funny way to look at fear. But fortunately, I'm not one of those people. Yeah, I mean, the fear of death. Yeah, I mean, going through a tough loss, someone as close as your brother, right? I think certainly makes your relationship with death and the fear of death evolve quite a bit. And I think in the down moments, it's certainly crippling, right? It's this feeling of, hey, this can all kind of get taken away at any point. And, what's the point of certain things? Why try so hard for whatever it is, whatever, whether it's hobby or passion of yours, whether it's, lifelong goals and career milestones or whatever. Right. And certainly in the early days when Pavan got sick, I had a few months where that was how I felt. And again, credit to those around me, my parents, Rahul, friends, family, um, encouraging me to keep moving. And honestly, more than anyone, Pavan himself, need to give him a shout out. He's one of the most fearless people, I've known. And I think that helped kind of bring that perspective I mentioned earlier back into my life, and honestly strengthen it over time, which is, hey, this can get taken away at any point. Let's make the most of the time that we have. You know, be intentional with your time, with your values. Um, you know, reflect. Have that reflect in the way you live your life day to day. Whether it's trying to be a good person, trying to make an impact, trying to find passion, trying to find love, trying to find enjoyment, all of that. At the end of the day, that's all you can control, right? You don't have control over when you're going to die, how you're going to die, any of that stuff. I think that was the toughest part during his illness for our parents and me and everything, was feeling helpless and trying to do everything we could to take control. Researching things, talking to as many doctors as we can talk to, traveling places. At the end of the day, you learn you don't have any control over this. So might as well embrace what you do have control over, right? And try to make the most of it. So, it's a hard fought, hard earned perspective. Not something I would wish on anyone. I'd certainly rather have some ignorance and still have him around. But it's something you gain, I guess, through that kind of experience, right? So
the other angle that's been bouncing around in my head is, even when we think about this idea of fear of failure, I think there's level one of it is just maybe some version of public speaking, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to fail and people are going to know about it and I'm going to look worse. And so it affects kind of that esteem that we have because it's on display. And the more, the bigger the dream, the bigger the failure, is one way it can feel. The other thing I was thinking though, as it directly ties to what you both were talking about, though, the kind of maybe a more philosophical layer is, why is failure scary in the context of fear of death, right? And it's like, I think there's maybe something around like dying without having succeeded, and I think in some ways that can be a driver that, like, hey, I want to make sure that I do something or make something of myself or my life or what I want to put out in the world, and that's important to me, and I want to make sure I do that before I die. On the other hand, it can almost make it too big, and almost put too much weight around it, right? That, hey, if I don't get that, then and I die, like, what does that mean my life was? And I don't know, this is just amusing, but I'm like, I wonder how much of that underlies some of the like feeling, right, around failure, and not being able to view failure as a stepping stone, but viewing failure as an end unto itself, right? That, hey, if I fail here, am I going to fail again? Am I going to fail again? Right? Am I going to fail yet again? And if I keep failing, what does that mean for me in the context of my life? And yeah, just I think with that, right, I think it feels even heavier rather than something positive or
Mm-hmm.
constructive.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Vern.
No, I was just, the other thought that came to mind with what Rahul just said. Tim Ferriss is someone we both enjoy reading, and 4 Hour Work Week's been an important book for both of us. And one of the things he talks about is essentially flipping this relationship, with fear of death with fear of not experiencing, right? And he talks about how so much of the book's about your relationship with time, and he talks about how for the average person, you wait till you're 65, 70 to start to experience life, and you do it out of fear of what that time might be like if you take chances right now. And he inverts that, and it's, I don't want to die not having done all the things I want to do. I want to structure my life so I get to do these things, so I get to enjoy my life, so I get to live it. That's what I'm more afraid of, not doing these things. And I know that had, throughout my life, whenever I revisit that book, it has a huge impact on me. And when I hear it that way, to me at least, it feels so obvious that that's the bigger fear. You don't have control over death, right? Why fear it? Or not why fear it? Obviously, the fear is there, but why dwell on that fear? Versus all these other ones, I can control it. I can control what I do each day, each morning. How much passion, excitement, purpose am I bringing to my life? I can control if I, didn't maximize that during whatever time I have here. So, I think that's kind of how what Raul was saying and the initial question kind of resonate for me in the relationship with death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just such a powerful and interesting topic because, life is, as I was speaking with a client earlier this week, it's like life is not complete without death. Death is kind of like the period or the exclamation point to our lives. And there's a lot of inspiration that we can draw from that, if we relate to it in a healthy way, in a positive way. And so, yeah, I guess at this point, we're kind of coming up probably on where we should wrap up for today's episode. But I guess I feel very nourished and touched by just listening, being part of this conversation with both of you, hearing both of you talk. Something about, of course, your experiences together as founders and going through this whole journey, but then again, as you experience as brothers and going through really the depth and complexity of what that relationship is like, has just given me a lot to think about. So I just want to say thank you to you guys. And I'm curious, how has it been for each of you just being here and cracking this seal? We got Varun on the show finally. I feel like I keep saying this on air to Rahul, but like my vision of this show, Varun, is more like, okay, yeah, experts, but like more friends and like people, dudes on the couch to go like back to some stoner films from my childhood. It's like just being real with the deep human relationships that exist in our life. And I'm curious just how you guys feeling after being on air together and opening up into some kind of deep chapters of your life together.
Yeah, I'm appreciative to both of you for the opportunity and being able to explore this and structuring it in such a thoughtful way, and enjoyed it. It feels like a conversation me, Rahul, a couple of our cousins might have on a couch, just like you said. Obviously a little more guided and structured, but that's a good thing. And so, yeah, enjoyed it, and even for myself, I think there's some valuable takeaways from this exploration we had together.
Yeah, what I'm always reminded of, I think, in many of our episodes at this stage as we're wrapping up, right, is sometimes it's not even like a new idea that has that resonant sort of halo effect into the rest of the day. But the familiar ones that are carrying even more weight or have surfaced to the top, of mind. And specifically, I think the one I'm thinking about right now is just this, the ongoing nature of fear and like being just a little bit more attuned, even marginally more attuned to like the fears that are present in my life right now, and giving space to them, hearing what they're saying, like listening to that companion, and also just trying to harness that, as opposed to run from it. And I think there are areas, that have come to mind as we've gone deeper into this conversation. And yeah, just feeling grateful, for that spark to go into some of those places.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Varun, thanks so much for joining us today on the show. I hope it's not the last time. I think we should get you back just to kick it and see what comes of it. And thank you guys for just opening up so much about your experience as startup founders together, your experiences with your family, with your brother. And, for folks listening to this, I just want to say, get out there. Let's hunt this stuff down together. Let's find out, where are your fears right now? And I'm sure if you're anything like me, there's also just hearing about this topic, hearing these two reflect on it, it just stirs so much. And you can feel it if you tap into your body, if you just sense your energy and your thoughts, there's just so much immediately available with regards to what am I scared of? What am I holding myself back from? Where is my edge that fear indicates? And what might I be able to do about it if I lean into it and say, okay, I'm ready to turn around and face you. And so I wish you well in that pursuit as you kind of explore your own journey and take the next steps in your life. As always, thank you so much for tuning in with us. You can find our episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find the video version of this. If you're not already watching it on YouTube, you can find it on our YouTube channel. Just search Woven Wings Live. You'll see our long form episodes. You'll see highlight reels and clips and shorts of the episodes as well. And just share us with a friend. Tune in. You can join our newsletter. It's in the show description. And more than anything, just we wish you well as you make this journey your own and take the tools forward into your life. And of course, as we mentioned, this is the second episode in this mini series on facing fear. We're going to be getting into the science of this in a lot more depth in our next episode. So check that out when it drops in a couple weeks. And on behalf of the Didwanias, which I am not one of them, I'd just like to say thank you guys. Thanks to you guys and thanks to all our listeners. And we will see you out there next time. Take care and catch you later.